This Covert Code podcast is in partnership with Forbes Books.
Aloha. My name is Anna Covert, and on this episode of Authority as a Growth Strategy, a Forbes Books series presented by the Covert Code, the topic is Authority Brand Building, becoming the face of your brand. My very special guest is Natalie Mazzarella, Vice President of Authority Brand Building at Advantage Media. Through her 15 years of experience shaping global brands such as Gucci and Tiffany & Co., today she helps leaders step into authority with intention. Today we'll be talking about how personal brand is now a leadership mandate and how authorship becomes an inflection point where wisdom becomes legacy. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Anna. I'm excited as well.
Great. So to start us off, we like to kick it off with just a little Natalie Cliff Notes of, you've had an amazing journey so far in your career. And how did you get from where you were to where you are right now sitting in this chair?
Yes, great question. I like to call it the scenic route, for lack of a better way to explain it. But I've had the pleasure of being with Advantage Media for the last 3 years as our VP of Authority Brand Building, as you said. Previously, I have an agency background, so worked in a public relations and communications agency that worked predominantly in luxury consumer goods, as you said, Gucci, Tiffany & Company, Burberry, the list goes on. I've worked in CPG and some cannabis and a little bit of everything. I like to say my client list has been everything from Prada to pot to potato chips, all of which is true. So it's been very interesting.
Three P's. And then they're all good together. They all go together too. If you can have this pot.
In some way, honestly, yeah, I think they do. Wonderful experiences on the agency side for 10 years as an executive director in that business. And then prior to that, I actually worked in-house for a women's retailer called Loft. Everyone is probably very familiar with that brand. It is an Ann Taylor brand. And I worked in-house in their corporate PR department outside of right in New York at their corporate headquarters. So a lot of retail, a lot of PR, but if you dial it a little bit even further back than that, I actually am a licensed cosmetologist. That is my very big scenic route. How I began my adult life, post-education, went to cosmetology school, and I actually started my own studio salon, which is then how I paid for the remainder of my education, which then put me on the path to where I am today. So a little unorthodox, but it was a crash course in client service and managing people, which has significantly weighed into my professional life since then. So a little bit random, but it has all led me to where I am today and working with CEOs and business leaders to help tell their stories.
Wow, yeah, that's really interesting. And actually, we have something in common. So after I went to business school in Boston and I moved out to Hawaii, I didn't think I'd stay here. I was going to go back to Boston, but I did a symphony fashion show for a nonprofit, right, for the symphony. And afterward, one of the big sponsors was Paul Brown, who was the largest salon and spa chain owner in Hawaii at the time. He always was mistaken for Paul Mitchell, which was like a little bit of a sore spot for him, but he was big in his own name. And I wrote, one of the business plans I wrote was for a cosmetology school for Paul Brown Institute. Yeah. So I think it's really important. So especially with this topic that we're talking about here about, being the face of your brand, right? And that's kind of right in line with what you learn about your haircut and about everything that you put together. Your brand is so much more than a logo, right? And I think that's it's that whole feel, and no one knows that better than you, working with all these high-end retailers, really. So when you talk to a CEO, Bridget, how do you really bring that out of them? How do you help them define what is their personal brand and how that they can really grab hold of it?
Yeah, I think it's a really challenging thing for business leaders to think about because they've spent so much time, financial capital, calories, et cetera, building their businesses. And that's where all of their focus has gone. And then all of a sudden you're saying, okay, now it needs to be about you. So there's the ego component of it, which I think is really difficult for people to get over because it feels self-serving and it feels silly and it feels unfamiliar because it's oftentimes something that they've never spent the time doing. But whether or not they have invested invested in their personal brand or established what that personal brand really is, it exists because it's who you are. It's everything that you have done in your career. It's what your, mission and vision, is as a leader. It's what you're hoping to leave as a legacy, the impact you're hoping to make. All of that is part of your personal brand. And it's just a matter of really kind of understanding what the pieces are and then getting them organized and put down on paper. So I started as a conversation, as all things should be, because we learn the most from people, from sitting down and talking to them and really, trying to understand what our authors are hoping to achieve. What is the purpose of, which leads them to the authority building journey to begin with, which is most oftentimes their book, of course. But what are they hoping to do with it? And then that helps us start to carve out, okay, what is your why? And then let's figure out how to make sure that what we're saying about you and the positioning of that explains the why, and it provides value to people. I think we say often internally here, and I think it's a really important note, that there's two different ways to look at yourself as a business owner or a business leader. There's an operator with something to sell, and then there's a teacher with something to teach. And consumers are smart. They know when they're being sold to. They know what that is. They're not buying it, not literally, but, they're not interested in that. What they are interested in is tell me something valuable, inspire me, teach me something. And those are the people that, consumers are wanting to listen to. And that's where personal brand comes in.
I think that's a really good point, because I think what I've also heard in agency work, and a lot of, I think, where people get held up is that they're so passionate about so many things, or they think that they should be talking about so many things. Right. And it's like, oh, well, I'm supposed to be saying all these, well, okay, well, let's really drill it down to, because you can't be everything to everyone.
Exactly.
And that breaks down very quickly, especially with how the consumer is. I think you're right. Like, we're getting much, much better at using our spidey senses to be like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel authentic. Or you said this before, and now everything's documented online, right? Or on social. And, so I think that's one way to kind of really drill it down to, hey, like, what are you going to feel comfortable with as your, I guess, elevator speak, right?
Yeah.
But that can change too. But it's really about passion, and that becomes the clarity for this new brand persona.
Yeah, exactly. And I think your comment about it can change. I would argue that it should change if you're thinking about your personal brand having longevity, right? Humans evolve, humans change. We all do every day, but the world we live in also evolves and changes every day. And your why doesn't necessarily have to change, but maybe how you're talking about it or how you're approaching it as it relates to what's going on in the world today may evolve. And that's an important thing as well. Personal brands aren't concrete. They should be evolutionary. They should adjust as you continue to develop. And that's kind of where the fun lives, because it becomes a journey that you never really end. And there's no achieving a destination. It's the process of it, which is just really fun work for someone who gets to be involved in it. For our authors, it's very, very fun work. And I hope it's as fun for the authors themselves who are doing it.
I think that's really, I'm 100% in agreement with you, because, one thing that we always see, and almost 95% of people who work with us, we've updated their logo. Right.
Yeah.
And this can be, as you know, like one of the biggest heartaches. Like, people get so attached to this story, and I always take a lot of extra time to say, hey, look at all your favorite brands out there, Starbucks, all of them, Uber. I mean, everyone you can think of.
Uber, exactly. Apple, the list.
Right. And a lot of times, the consumer doesn't even know. It just feels more natural, more on brand. And, you change your haircut, you change your sofa. It's okay. It doesn't mean that it was bad. It just means you've outgrown it. Right.
Yes.
And so I think that what are you seeing as, a lot of CEOs are hesitant about, becoming the face of the brand or stepping forward. And what does that cost them? What is this hesitation going to cost? What's the ROI there of not taking?
Yeah. PwC does a study every single year, and I haven't looked at if there's been one released in the, a couple of weeks here that we're into 2026. But the most recent one was always about consumer trust. And the stat was that 90% of business leaders and CEOs believe that consumers trust their corporation, when in reality that number is 30%. That is a 60% swing, and that is higher. That is an increase from the previous year that they did the study, when it was 57%. So the math is mathing, and it is telling us that consumers are not taking stock in, having faith and trusting a corporation, but people do trust people. And so I think the real ROI, or the risk for a CEO to not put themselves forward as the face of a brand, is that they're not doing everything they can to establish trust with their core audience and with their consumers. And they're leaving opportunity and leads and money on the table by not doing that.
Yeah, and I think that really kind of segments into this, your branding for advantage of the 2026 year of authority, right? And I think honestly, with what's going with AI, and we just had in our other episode with Beth, we talked a lot about how that's becoming, you can't even turn around without someone talking about AI. It's in everything, right? And that's even more of a reason why that, you have to do it now. Like, you cannot wait. And no, making an AI version of yourself is not the answer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I think, there's a lot of ways to look at creating a brand. And, one of the most common questions is, I don't even know where to begin. And I think the takeaway is, even if you're choosing not to think about what your personal brand is, some version of it exists out there, whether you've put effort into it or not. And that can be as simple as your LinkedIn profile. It's saying something, whether you've taken time to think about what that is, it's still saying something. Or if you're showing up nowhere, that's saying something in and of itself. In the world of AI that we're living in today, it's changing, on a dime and on a moment's notice. It's a little bit different, but the current situation is, AI optimized search results are obviously overtaking what we're seeing as far as standard Google search results, but also people can now do separate searches within AI, and AI is valuing earned media results for individuals. So if you were to go to, a chat and say, tell me about on a Covert, it's going to pull me information on you, but it is going to prioritize earned media results to tell me who you are. And earned media results are very much tied to, obviously, media coverage, which stems back to putting yourself forward as the face of a brand or the face of your company, or as a thought leader, or as an author. And so all of these things are interconnected. And to make the decision to do nothing means that you're going to be very, very far behind as we're continuing to see AI, evolve and develop into how we search for information and how we find information.
Absolutely. And I think even just for leaders out there who are listening, I think there's a concern about aging out, right? And or being overqualified, or the qualifications aren't really enough anymore, in today's day and age. Like, you need to be proving yourself constantly that you are, a thought leader. And the only way to do that is really to commit to some kind of visibility, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think that we say that authority is recognized, not claimed. Like, tell me more about what the difference is and what people misunderstand about personal branding.
Yeah, there's the whole well-known, it says it's more important what others say about you than what you say about you type of situation. And so we could start there with that. Earned media and, receiving press coverage is just one component of making sure that you're establishing, your thought leadership and your authority. And that's an important part of it. But I always counter that argument, which I do very much believe in as a publicist, just to say that is my background, and I'm thinking that is true, and that still remains true. But if you're not owning your own brand and your own narrative, then no one else is going to want to talk about you. So yes, it matters what other people have to say about you, or what credible outlets want to say about you, or interviews that you're giving, or speaking opportunities, et cetera. But if you're not taking the time to develop your brand and amplify that brand on your own, then you're going to miss out on opportunities to do that as well. And so that's the place to begin, and that's the place that everybody needs to start. And the really foundational, first step process for that is to sit down and establish a personal brand. And as you said, there's so many things that go into that. There's the obvious, here's my mission statement, here's my purpose, here's my target audience, here's my logo. But it's, what words do I use? What words do I not use? What platforms do I show up in? What color palette do I wear? I mean, the list is endless depending on who you are and what business you're in. But all of those things contribute to building a personal brand.
Yeah, and I just thought, as you're just speaking now, about how I think that some leaders out there, they might be overwhelmed, right? Oh, well, I'm writing a book, or what am I going to say? And I think the step is to think about how you are showing up to your employees or to your partners. Like, what do they see, and how are you, expressing this leadership internally? Because that can be a great place to start to play with these concepts, see what resonates before you start to push it out.
Yeah, no one is going to understand your business and your purpose as a CEO and as a leader than the people who work with you and for you every day. And that can be inclusive of your board, that your stakeholders, your people within your company, your team. And I want to be clear that it is a question I hear a lot of, well, how does my personal brand connect to my company? Does it not? And there are, myriad instances of which the answer can be very different depending on the person. But in a lot of times, yes, it can absolutely be connected to your business. You are just the face of your business, and you are an individual who is looking to inspire trust and, provide value. And then the business is the thing that's the sales engine of that. But if you're thinking about where to begin, trying out language and, internal memos, speeches, communications, lunch and learns, opportunities to get in front of your company or your colleagues to, discuss some of these things. They're going to be the ones that can provide feedback of whether or not they feel like it actually is supportive or there's a through line between, what your purpose is as a CEO and a leader within the company, and then how that relates to being, an external thought leader that has visibility.
Yeah, I think, I was just having another podcast with another Advantage author, Gina Riley, and we were talking about like even creating a folder, in your email, like a bragging folder. So you might be forgetting, or start now and say, hey, every time someone writes me an email and they're thanking me or being like, wow, holding me up for something that I've really done that's helped them or created more clarity, or, put it in a folder so that later on when you're thinking to yourself, well, what am I really great at? Like what value do I bring? Because people forget, right? Then you can go there and kind of like dig deep and be reminded. But I think that you're right, that there's a big difference between being the owner of a company. Like, I own this advertising agency, like I specialize in digital marketing. That was kind of like, of course, the bridge to my book, versus being a CEO of a big corporation where it's not your company. But where then do you fit in? What have you done? And how's that leverage for what you want to become or what you want to do next, right? Is the question.
Yeah. I love the folder. That's a great. I used to print out well wishes and emails similar when I would receive them from clients and whatnot, because it just kind of makes you feel good, especially when you're in those moments of insanity where you're just like, this is a day, and I need to be reminded that I know what I'm doing occasionally. Yeah. But asking your team, I think, is another great way to go about doing that. And like, where do I provide value? How do I help you? What am I good at? The people who are closest to you are going to be able to help you answer those questions, even in the moments where it's very hard to answer them yourself, which is, back to your point of like, where do people even begin on this road to do that?
And then to kind of circle back on some interesting thoughts about, the media and the algorithms and these tools, right? Because we get it a lot and everyone's struggling. And what many people may or may not know is, Google lost this antitrust lawsuit, but, just in October of 2025, they've really, they weren't really spanked at all. And now they're not going to have to sell YouTube. They're not going to have to change any of their partnerships to date, right?
Yeah.
So, they are in control of search and it's changing, right? And that can be very stressful for people. But, I think we know that this authority of having a brand like Forbes, for instance, or Entrepreneur, or some of these other imprints that you work with, right? That's a big difference of, when you're going to write a book, who you're going to pick and why you're going to do it is because of some of those ranks that are being established. Now, my question for you, and, as people are earning other types of earned media, and we're hearing a lot of pushback from some big companies about whether or not they'll allow crawling on their sites.
Yeah.
Right. Is this something that you're evaluating in terms of where you get earned media from? Do people need to be concerned about that as well? And what do you see as a future of that kind of saga?
Yeah, that's a question. Okay, so a couple things to think about. When it comes to earned media, there is the search result angle and value proposition of doing that. And you are completely right that, big name outlets such as Wall Street Journal, New York Times, or our partners like Forbes and Entrepreneur, et cetera, they carry a vast amount of domain authority. There's the obviously well-known brand recognition and credibility that creates. But your smaller outlets, while they don't carry the same level of cachet, both just from an optics perspective and also on the way that, that their sites perform, media breeds media. So I remind people of this all the time, because it is a common misconception of, I don't want to waste my time talking to a local newspaper or, an industry publication that maybe doesn't have a, million or billion readership, but they do, create wonderful editorial work, or my target audience is reading that, or et cetera. Starting with smaller publications, more niche publications, can lead to bigger opportunities, especially when you're getting started and building your thought leadership. It can take some time to kind of get the media cog spinning in a circle and, getting opportunities. And there's no bad opportunity, because it might not give you the search results that you're looking for, but it might open the door to a better interview or larger interview, because you're increasing, your own. There's the practice of interviewing and your messaging. There's taking that coverage and sharing it on social channels and putting it on your website and sharing it via email, which creates buzz. But there's also, media is a small world. There's smaller crews that are working at all publications. There's less journalists, less editors. A lot of people are freelancing in multiple publications, and you never know when an interview in something that might be more niche or local can lead to a bigger opportunity, because somebody else sees it, or somebody knows somebody who's working on another story, et cetera. So there's many ways to look at the value of media, even if it is not in like the big gets that everybody has on their wish list.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And then I think something that's important for listeners to understand is, when we say earn media, that does not necessarily mean it's free, right?
Correct.
And that's always the holy grail. It can. It can be free, but also you have to think about who, the relationships, because it is a smaller industry, and so having a publicist or having a company behind you like Advantage, who has these relationships and can help you with newsjacking, is a service, right? And there's a value to that. It's just like traditional advertising in a way. And sometimes even, in a local level, I'll tell you what, I thought that I'd have a lot easier. I own an advertising agency. I'm the largest in Hawaii. I thought that when I first came out with my book that I would be able to get more earned media here in Hawaii, because I get it for clients. Well, that was not the case, and it was really a struggle. And so I did some, paid news coverage and other small things like that, to just like you said, to get more
kind of like jumpstart it. Yeah.
Right. But even someone like me who has these connections, it's not always enough. So you have to really be open and don't get down on yourself. You have to find different ways to pivot. You have to think about, whose partnerships you're going to be engaging with.
Yes, exactly. And there's so many variables to it, like what's happening in the media cycle at any given point in time can throw a monkey wrench into outreach efforts, whether it's by, yourself, your team, or your publicist, what have you. And I'm talking even like there's the obvious, it's the holiday season. That can be a difficult time. But if there's a natural disaster, all media coverage on anything else stops, and there's just no opportunity. So there's just a million things that can kind of play into it. And it's really hard on a day-to-day basis to know what you're going to be facing when you wake up in the morning. But that's why you have partners and publicists and people who can do that for you, bringing back to your point that it's not always free, because there's a lot of people who are working on it. It's, it's free in the sense that you're not necessarily paying the publication, but you do have to have a team behind you who can help support you and get you through that process.
Absolutely. And actually, it's funny you should say that, because I do a lot of breakout PR here, and Hilo Hattie was one of my clients at the time, and they were, I was doing a Segway fashion show. So like, the Segways through Waikiki.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's fun.
It was really fun. And so we got pre-coverage, and then I shot this amazing footage. It was gorgeous. There was like Diamond Head and the sun was setting, and submitted it. And of course, everyone was really interested. And then there was a hurricane.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, so it can happen. It can happen to anyone, and you just never know, right?
You never know. And you're like, okay, what are we going to do? I did an event, this was years ago, for Italian retailer, and it's a very long story, but we had a red carpet on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and a step and repeat, which is for you would obviously know that is, but for anybody who's listening who does not, it's one of those big scrims that people stand in front of to get their pictures taken, and it has the logos of the brand on it and whatever. And it was the windiest day
Oh my
I maybe have ever experienced in the entire time that I lived in Chicago, which was some time. And the background for the photos was doing this the entire time. So every photo that we got on this red carpet, the background's a disaster. And so there's nothing you can do. There's no way to fix it. There's no way to tie it down. And thankfully, I had a wonderful photographer who edited every single photo that we took that night. But these are the things that you're like, there's nothing I can do.
No, and like the hair. I mean, I remember,
hands now.
I know. What was the hair like? I mean, that's what I think about immediately.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I was in Chicago once. I was driving back to Boston, and I got out of the car, and it was like I had to like hold on to the door. I was like, "Oh wow, this is why it's called the Windy City." Like I was like,
Yes, it is. It is.
Duh,
very
you
windy here. I have to ask you where. I don't know if we talked about this, and I'm going to go off the script a little bit, but I'm in Boston. So where were you?
I went to Bentley University in Waltham.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Very
Yeah,
good.
where are you?
North Andover. So not
Okay.
actually Boston, but I say Boston for anybody who's from here too.
Absolutely. You know, I loved Boston, and when I was going to school there 25 years ago, we didn't have smartphones, right? So I'll never forget you had to print MapQuest out.
Yep.
And God forbid you miss your turn, because in Boston, it's not on a grid, right?
Yeah.
And I would
So
be
you're
like,
driving way out of your way in a circle to try to get back to where you want to. Yeah.
and I actually, I was from Aspen, Colorado originally, and I went to prep school in California. And so I didn't do a lot of driving. And it was when I did do driving, it was open roads. And so here I am in Boston, and I was living off campus, and I never seen a roundabout before, what we called a rotary, right? And I'll tell you, Natalie, I was stuck in a rotary. So I got into it. I got all the way to the inside lane. I'm going around the circle, and no one will let me out because I'm not like a cutthroat driver, right? And so I'm crying in my car, like I'm driving, and a cop, like, who's so grateful, he sees me like bawling in my car, like stuck in this inside, and he helps me get out, and he pulls over, and I roll the window down, and he's like, "Sweetheart," like, "Sweetheart."
It's like the universal you just landed in Boston experience is the rotary disaster. My joke that I always say to myself is like, the good news is there's at least 4 Dunkin' Donuts in this rotary. So I'll just like keep stopping to get coffee because I'm never getting out.
Never. And he's like, "You're going to have to buck up, princess, if you're going to live here." And I was like, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." And then I did. I was like super cutthroat. And then when I moved to Hawaii, I had an opposite effect because I'm swerving in and out of traffic. I'm like honking at people. And my boss, remember, I was driving him somewhere, and he's like, "Oh, sweetheart,
People don't drive like that here.
you can't honk at people here." I'm like, "But he's like, it doesn't matter what he did." I'm like, "Really?" And then I started noticing that no one honks here. Like, you might do like a love tap if someone's like on their phone, and you're like, and then everyone waves, and they're like, "Oh, bro, oh,"
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's too funny. The streets in Boston, the like everything is not on a grid. I didn't know this until I moved here, but the original city structure is based off of cow paths, where people used to take their livestock to the Boston Common, and then they're like, "This works, let's just pave it." And then that's the way the streets are. So they make 0 sense. Yeah.
And like sheep too, weren't they? Like sheep and like yeah. So it's not
People
like
trading their livestock in the common, and they're like, "We'll just pave it, and this is now the city structure. Good luck figuring it out."
Good luck.
Yeah.
Then I dropped my niece off. She went to Bentley years later, and then I had my iPhone. I was like, "Wow, this is so enjoyable!" Like, wow,
I've only been here 11 years, so I've thankfully had a smartphone the entire time because there's no way.
I was in the big dig too.
Grid. I lived in New York, grid, Boston. I was like, I don't know how to do the city.
No, and I was in the big dig as well, so that was intense.
Oh my God, yeah.
But I was only in Southie for 1 year, and so it was like a little bit better. But anyways, back to the discussion here. So what happens when leaders, leave their personal brand a chance, and I think that they're trying to align with authority, but I think without corporate goals, like, how do they do it without feeling like it's, a conflict, I guess. It can be like a conflict with business.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have the perspective that it's in support of your business, that it is just another lever you pull to eventually grow and develop the opportunities that your business can have, making the assumption that you're not building your personal brand because you're exiting your business. Obviously, there will be exceptions to that. But the analogy that we talk about a lot at Advantage is, your business is a highway. Okay. You want as many cars on that highway at any given point in time because that's how your business is going to, financially grow. You, as the thought leader, are the on-ramp to the highway. So your personal brand and your ability to have conversations with people, establish trust, have speaking opportunities, have media opportunities as this face of your personal brand, which is in support of your corporate brand, is how cars are getting onto the highway to lead to opportunities for your business. And so leaving that to chance or not engaging with it at all is, back to what we said some time ago, is just leaving opportunity on the table. And if you say nothing or do nothing, then people are going to always establish their own perceptions and their own narrative. And, if you're not contributing to it or owning it in some way, then you're leaving it up to what consumers decide or don't decide. And then that ultimately has impacts to your business and to your opportunity.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that right now, especially that's being the year of authority, some things people can do right away is, if you have not already, go buy your domain name.
Yes.
Look up your name. Because when I actually bought my daughter's name, which is Emma Covert, but there was someone who owned Anna Covert.
I should probably buy my son's. That's a very good.
You should absolutely go buy it, right?
Yeah.
And so it was right before we were going to get ready to do the book cover, and the team at Forbes was like, what is it going to be? And I was like, oh my God, I was trying to get the name from GoDaddy. There was an actress who had it. We went back and forth, and I got every other iteration, like Anna M. Covert and this and that. And finally, I was just about to give up on it and go with my middle initial on the book, and she finally agreed to sell it to me. But it can be very expensive later, so you don't want to do that. Do it now, and then start to think about. I know a lot of people out there. I have a friend I went to Bentley with who recently sold her parents' company. So she's my age. She's 42, and she's taking a little break, but that's not going to be forever. Right. Yeah. So, you try to imagine the future self, and you might be really happy now. You might be on a path to sell your company or whatever. You can't see further ahead, but pretend that you are in the future. And, because now you can start doing these little things. It doesn't have to be a full-time job, but you can start to create the post once a month or, something to
clean up your social platforms, make sure that they're consistent. So if somebody is, whether they're Googling you today or they're putting you in chat in tomorrow's version of this, and what the results that show up are, you want consistency across platform. And I'm talking like very simple things that people can do. Your profile pictures might want to match across your platforms. Your description of yourself, making the assumption that you're choosing to have public profiles outside of LinkedIn. Some people don't want to, and that's perfectly fine. But making sure that, your title and your description of yourself is serving what you are really hoping to achieve. LinkedIn is a really, important thing to think about, because the LinkedIn of the past was essentially a digital resume. It does not operate like that anymore. That is not what the platform is best utilized as, and that's not what users are going to it for. It's for thought leadership. It's for connection. I think people leave a lot on the table when it's just, okay, here's my background and there's nothing else. People want to know who you are. That's a place that you can spend some time, audit your connections, audit the thought leaders you follow, make sure the content that you're being served as a user of the platform is inspiring to you, to help give you, direction and ideas for what you may want to do for yourself as a thought leader. And then post once a month, post once a week, whatever that cadence is that you feel like you can commit to, as long as it is somewhat regular, which don't post something and then not go back on until 6 months later. You don't have to post every day, but try to hold yourself accountable to put some content out there about your ideas, your message. You can talk about trending news in your industry. It doesn't all need to be completely brand new content started from scratch, but you can get involved in the conversation. And just doing that practice is going to help get the wheels turning and help you start thinking about what your unique perspective might be when the time comes that you're ready to really spend some time developing your personal brand.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think now, especially with AI, it can be so much easier, right? Before, people were like, oh, you got to get in the mental space to do it. It's just not the kind of copy that I write. But write whatever you want to write, and then put it into AI and say, make this into a LinkedIn post for me.
Yes.
And then tell it shorter, or I want it to be more inspirational, right? Yeah. Like, we have these tools, and then it can be very liberating to be able to write content quickly, and get it scheduled.
Yes.
Let's talk about the idea of legacy, and really authorship, and because there's more than just, personal. What does this personal brand become, right? And there's that inflection point, right, that we talked about of where wisdom becomes legacy. So tell me about, some of the authors you work with or people you've encountered, and how they, they use the book and this to pivot, right, or because they have to, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the strongest ways to establish authority in the year of authority and beyond is, of course, writing a book. It is wonderful to have the physical manifestation.
It is wonderful to hold your book. And
yes, there's nothing better. There's truly nothing better than that. Beautiful cover, by the way, on yours. So there's that side of it. But to be able to say, I am the person that wrote the book on X, there is really nothing that beats that from, an authority building perspective. It's just instant credibility. But, turning that into a legacy, the thing to know about books and the thing to know about what we believe at Advantage is that, stories matter, and the work that we are helping our authors get out into the world is not only growing their businesses, but the goal is that it benefits all humankind, which is, I realize, like a really big, lofty statement to say, but it is something that we truly believe. And, going through the work of getting your words down on paper and then having a physical book and then utilizing that book as a catalyst for what you hope to be your next chapter, I guess, pun intended, in your career or in your business or whatever that is a really, really powerful thing. And so that in and of itself creates some sort of a legacy because there is something physical and tangible that can lead on, for many, many years to come. But the jumping off point and then what you do after that also helps develop your legacy. So most of our authors, come to us obviously with the main goal of writing a book, but the secondary goals to that, one of the most common is to become a speaker, to, exit their business, to some people really come to us with, I want to leave a legacy. This is the thing I want to do because I'm going to retire right around after this. And I just want to do this to have a nice closeout, to the work that I've done. And so there are many different ways that we support people on those journeys. But all of the after and the longevity that comes out of the work that has gone into this book that then you can use for speaking opportunities, conference opportunities, selling the book itself, media opportunities, whatever that looks like for you and your individual goals is the thing that then carries on and continues to create more traction and create a legacy.
Yeah, and something that I learned from my book process was that was really powerful was how we as a culture we really have a feeling of books and as having that authority intrinsically as part of them. So when you give someone a book, right, you don't throw it away, right, because it makes you feel bad. Right, we're trained that that's not, you might give the book away to someone else or donate it, but you don't toss it in a trash can.
Yeah,
and that just should be enough to say, okay, this is the most powerful leave away that I can give anyone.
It matters.
It matters, right? And people if they're immediately thinking to themselves, "Oh, that's not true." Well, think about the last time you threw a book away. Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe you have. Maybe it was probably the Yellow Pages. I'm not sure if we call that a book or not, but
yeah.
I don't know why they keep sending it to me. I'm like, I've just been trying to.
You still get one? Wow.
And they drop it off and they'll get
that is a hefty book.
Well, here in Hawaii is not that big because we're not that big, but still, I think that's really something that it becomes the best marketing tool that you can have, and you don't do it because you want to make money on it. You do it because it is that legacy that is you're serious. This is serious, and someone can read it and they can learn more about you and really answer all the questions that they have, and make a better decision about what they want to do with their lives, and that's something that is it feels good to do.
Yeah. I want to go back to the question you asked me right at the top of our discussion about, what kind of led me to being in the seat that I am in today. And it's very much tied to this in that I don't care if I'm talking about a sink faucet or if I'm talking to someone like you who's, written a book and has this incredible background. If the story is good, I'm hooked. I'm interested and I want to hear it and I want to know more. And I really do think that is true for so many people. And so the value of being able to create something like that and being able to be a part of it for our authors and help them as they're on this journey is really powerful. So
it is. So, So we talked a little bit about some things people can do right now. Do you have other tips, to conclude here on maybe like a 5-year plan or some other different benchmarks that someone can be looking for? And before you answer, I want to know that no, like you do not have to actually write your own book. You can, you can get a ghostwriter. I wrote my own book,
Yes.
but then had excellent editing, which was like, game changing from the team at Forbes Books. But, you still have to craft your opinions. So, I mean, just with that being said, what are some other things people should be thinking of for the long-term goal?
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about 3 things. I think you don't have to write the book 100% true, but if you are looking to sort of get your ideas down on paper, whether it's just to better understand your individual perspective and your expertise, whether it's I'm going to use whatever I get down on paper to maybe someday write a book. You can do a Substack. You can do LinkedIn native articles, which are longer form content. You don't have to do short form posts. You can write an email newsletter. You can write a blog. I mean, there are a million things that you can do, all of which, back to your point about AI, don't have to take the same level of like intellectual capital that it used to now. It still needs to be you in your opinion, but you can absolutely use AI as a tool for editing support to help that process go a little bit easier. Fully AI created content is never going to tell your individual story because it's not you. So it's still, there's that side of it. But there's ways to start getting your ideas out. And there's the feeling of like, okay, I have now put this out into the universe, which is incredibly fulfilling, but it may also inspire you to continue on and then maybe think about a book for future. Another thing that we tell our authors, we typically in some of the first conversations that we had, and this was probably said to you and we first started talking to you too, if you remember, but we always recommend to sit down and write who are the 50 people, whether they're in your network now or you wish they were in your network professionally, that you want to be connected to in some way. And whether that is for business opportunities, whether that's their leading voice in your industry and you're really interested in being connected with them or working with them in the future, that list is a little bit different for everybody. But sit down and craft down that list. And then figure out a way to start engaging. And the easiest way to do that is over social media. And I would hedge my bets that a good number of people that might be on that dream list of yours are putting their own content out somewhere, Substack, LinkedIn, et cetera. And you can engage with that and you can start, reading it and create those connections because they will come into play at some point, one way or another, as you continue to grow, your own thought leadership. And then the third side of it is just following the news cycle. It's you mentioned newsjacking earlier on. It's such an easy thing to do. And I don't think people realize how impactful that can be. And what that means is, for whatever your industry is or your expertise, pay attention to what's being talked about in the news related to that topic on a daily basis. You don't have to do it every day, meaning respond to something every day, but just understand what's being talked about. And if there's a trending story that is in your area of expertise or in your industry that you have a comment on, and that comment could be, I agree with this is great. That comment could be, I disagree with this. Here's where the reporter maybe missed something or left something out, or I have an additional note on this. Here's another way to think about it. You can take your opinion and take that perspective and post about that on LinkedIn. That's how you start creating content of your own. We call that newsjacking. So it's inserting yourself into the middle of a trending news story. And it's a really easy way to start establishing your own thought leadership and your own brand voice on social channels or wherever you choose to put that. The reason I suggest social is because if you're also establishing connections with other thought leaders, it's a great way to start kind of bolstering your own little community and your own little network, which can someday become future opportunities and potentially readers of your book if that's something that you choose to do. And those are all very easy things to do in addition to buying your domain and, updating your social.
Right. I think that's a really good point. And then another thing that on that note is, I think a lot of people make the mistake of being bullish or shy in the profile. So they might go and start liking people on LinkedIn and then they post something and they just do a thumbs up. That's not going to help you. Right? The thumbs up is not going to help you. Like a thumbs up, okay, fine. If you want to thumb it up, go for it.
It's better than nothing.
Better than nothing, but because you'll have more engagement, you'll be able to see that content. If you don't thumb them up, you might not see their content. So that's part one. But part two is instead of writing something like, oh, congratulations, or something that doesn't have any juice or meat behind it, take the time to think about what they wrote and how you can add value in agreement and your own unique perspective into what they've written.
Yes.
And that's how you get attention. And then that person's like, oh, wow, that was a really profound comment. Who are they?
Yes. That's
right?
how you establish an actual conversation with someone. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be, yes, it can be a full-time job, but it doesn't have to be. If you just schedule, 10 minutes a day or during lunch or something like that, you're going to go through LinkedIn. Your point, I think it's a great idea. Have like 10 people this month and then maybe 10 people next month. You're going to go do some cyber stalking, right?
Yeah. Just a little,
doesn't have
use
to be
AI.
creepy.
It's another great place to use AI, learn about them a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been super interesting. Do you have any final thoughts for anyone that you want to share?
Don't be afraid to get started. I think, perfection is this, sort of looming concern that everyone has that it needs to be right. It needs to be the right time. It needs to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect, just like anything. And there's always a good time to start, and that time is now. So don't be afraid to do it.
That's really good advice. And I think even now with how things are going, people, especially younger generations, are craving authentic content. And that comes with flaws. Like that is putting yourself out there. Like you're saying, maybe your hair doesn't look so great. Maybe you sluttered a little bit or whatever. You said the wrong name. Just keep going. And
there was an article about that. Gosh, I have to... possibly New York Times. I'd have to look. But it was basically that the imperfect content is now replacing, even for brands who are creating beautiful product imagery all the way down to that, they're looking for imperfection because that's what people are best engaging with and reacting to, because anything that seems too overly perfect or AI generated to some degree, people are like, I don't want that. I want the human connection. I want the imperfection. I want the real story. I want to hear what some individual has to say. So you don't have to feel like it has to be perfect, because it's okay.
Right. That's even more. It's even more on brand for it to be not perfect. Right. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here. And, we're going to have more content in the post here. This is a four-episode series with Forbes Books. And so we'll have more content on the Covert Code. There'll be also a way that you can, reach out and get your first blueprint. Can you tell us a little bit about the blueprint process and what people can expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So our blueprint process is an opportunity for anyone who's interested in taking the author journey or authority building journey to have a conversation with us. We'll do deep dive discovery to understand what your goals and objectives are, and whether that's going into the book writing process or going into the authority building process. And we can help you sit down and actually craft out an entire plan for what your book could be, and oftentimes what it winds up being for most of our authors. And we have wonderful people involved in that. We have strategists and book architects and everyone who can kind of sit down and help you carve out what that actually is and put it on paper. And then from there, we can, help make recommendations on how to bring it to life in one way or another, which can include everything from an actual physical book to, establishing a personal brand through brand strategy and, media relations and digital and all of the things that we offer at Advantage Media as well.
And even podcasts. That was one thing. I know you guys do podcasts too. And it was actually recommended to me when I first started my book that I thought about doing a podcast. And, at the time, I never realized how incredible the experience would be. And, right now, just being we're about to launch our 100th episode, and we just achieved over 100,000
followers. Yes.
Followers.
So incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you. But I think really the most interesting thing has been the platform to connect with people like yourself and really get to sit down and talk to all kinds of individuals. And that's been a really rich experience. So there's lots of ways that you can engage. And I think the blueprint is completely no obligation, and it's a great place to start. And I think people find a lot of value in it. So go to the Covert Code, the /Forbes Books, and you can get the process started. And we're here for you every step of the way. Thanks so much for being here, Natalie.
Thank you, Anna, for having me. It was a blast.
For all my listeners, please join me on the next episode of the series. And I will see you in the pixels then. Aloha. Natalie made it crystal clear. Authority today requires serious visibility, and leaders simply can't afford to sit back and hide behind their company brand any longer. But once you decide to step into the spotlight, the next question is critical. How do you build long-term authority? In our next episode, Demystifying the Publishing Process, Accelerating Your Authority Journey, I sit with Tyler LeBlue to talk about what it really takes to turn big ideas into a credible, enduring long-term asset, or as I like to call it, a book. This episode is packed with so much information, and it is a critical next step in your authority journey, so do not miss it. It's streaming now, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and I can't wait to see you in the pixels. Aloha.